Hey, y'all. Hey, it's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, I'm glad y'all here. I don't know what I'd be doing to these glasses, child. I'm telling you, my glasses are typically clean, and every time I get on Filter Free Friday or get ready, they be a hot mess. I think it's important today to talk about how cold it is outside. I did not buy this coat. My mother-in-law gave it to me. In fact, her little initials is in it. But she's about 5 inches shorter than me. So I had to go get some extra added to this about, I don't know, 5 years ago. Nonetheless, uh, I'm always thinking whenever I wear it out that somebody might throw some paint on me. And I don't know if y'all know I can fight. And the reason I'm thinking about that is because if somebody throws some paint on me, I might need y'all to go to my bank and get some bail money, get me out, because I'm probably gonna fight. We're probably gonna make CNN. And speaking of bail money, did y'all see old boy came up with $250 million bond? I keep trying to figure out what I got to do in the world in order to be able to pay a $250 million bond. Y'all, we got to figure this out. The, the president of the United States paid, former president of the United States paid $750 in taxes one year. I That's not what I'm talking about today. What I'm talking about today is about like the pros and cons of writing your thoughts down on books. What I love about the fact that when you write your thoughts down on books, in books, is that if somebody has a thought about who you are or what you think, feel, or believe, you can usually point to a document and be like, yeah, nah, that ain't it, sis. Bruh, I wrote it down. And so this little book I wrote once because I was doing some work in community, and my other books are really written for corporations or people who are inside large organizations. And it's really just about the different ways that people approach social activism or inclusion. And I highlight that if all you do when you're gardening is plant things and tills the soil and plant more things, you're probably gonna have some problems. Um, because if you don't have a weed pulling strategy, your garden gonna be overtaken with weeds. And here's why. I got a little rocky patch of uh, land outside my window here in my office, and in the summer times, it is like it's scorching hot where those rocks are. Ain't no dirt there. It's just rocks. And I can't grow anything there. Even sometimes when I put things in plant and potters, it's like too hot. And but what's interesting is what does grow there is weeds. And so I regularly talk about the need to have weed pullers, people who will go deep and go hard when an issue arises. And so when people think that I am like against weed pulling strategies or even think that I'm a weed puller, I'm usually a little shocked, because when you think about the range of ways in which people can attack or tackle things that are exclusionary, I'm certainly not a weed puller. I'm not. I'm a planter. Now, am I going to say things in direct ways? But that's not weed pulling. Am I going to speak truth to power? Yep, but that's not weed pulling. Weed pullers are the ones that say no, you need to go further. And I typically like weed pullers because weed pullers are actually good to make organizations do what they need to do. Inside organizations, if you have weed pullers, what tends to happen is they end up getting fired, because and the way they get fired is it is usually said that, hey, y'all don't align to the mission and vision of the organization, or what you're trying to do is going to cost us money. And you know what, um, Cheryl said that seems like all that bail money could go to towards some reparations. Somebody's got some money somewhere. Now, in addition to me knowing that we need tillers, people who are willing to go into spaces and be the first, very excited about the first Black woman who white people allowed to be the president of Harvard University. Exceptional work, Dr. Claudine Gay. And I don't ever want to be anybody's tiller. I cannot go into space where there, in fact, I mentioned a few weeks ago that I'm struggling being in a space where I'm kind of the only one. And I'm actually still not the only one, but it's still a challenge. But with that though, I have no grandiose ideas that people are not going to make mistakes, horrible mistakes. I'm never surprised when people make mistakes. I'm disappointed, but never surprised. But here's what I am usually disappointed in: when people make mistakes and we don't handle them as we should. Now, I wrote another little book, and that's why writing books is good. This book is called The Power of 7 Second Chances: Obtaining Success Without Firing the Rest. I have documented and proven why firing people, especially in school districts, is not good for children. When you look at the school to prison pipeline and the way we kick kids out of school, you can usually find a place where we are kicking adults out, and that is trickling down to students. There's a correlation between those two things. Now, here's what that does not mean. What that does not mean is that if somebody does one of the non-negotiables, that you keep them on staff. Now, we should just talk about what the non-negotiables are. I worked in a place where it was really hard to get fired, a large corporation. It was really hard to get fired there. That's probably not true anymore, but it was true then. But if you lied on some documentation, like say you said you were sick on FMLA and it turned out you weren't, you was gonna get fired. Or let's say you said you had 1 degree and you really didn't have that degree, you was gonna get fired. So overt lying, especially on documentation, was gonna get you fired. Let's say you stole money. So you using your corporate card for situations in which you shouldn't. And quite frankly, one time I did that, and I talked about it in the Wholly Educated MFer. I didn't do it, but somebody I knew used my corporate card, and I thought for sure I was going to get fired, but I didn't get fired. And remember, this book is about overcoming the unthinkable for all the people who get upset about the title. But if you stole money, use your corporate card for offenses you shouldn't have, you're gonna get fired. There was a plant manager one time who used his corporate card for a whole bunch of like clothes and stuff. Out of there, and people loved him. Let's say you grab somebody sexually inappropriately, you're gonna get tossed. Let's say if they did a drug test and you failed the drug test. Now they didn't do random drug tests, but if you ended up getting in an accident or something in the plant, you were gonna get fired. But the other thing that you would get fired for was saying things like the N word, saying things like the F word, saying things like the C word, the B word. You could not use no pejoratives. Those are considered non negotiables. Now, this is basic human resource practice. Okay. This is not diversity and inclusion. This is not race equity. In some ways, this is just regular old technical leadership, human resource management. You can't call people the N word inside organizations and keep your job. We don't need to do an investigation. If you did it, it's a problem. And so I think sometimes I'm shocked. I'm not shocked ever when someone does these things, lies on documentation, steals money, grabs somebody inappropriately, sexually, um, you know, uses racial pejoratives or other pejoratives. That don't shock me. But when you don't have basic policy around getting these kind of taking care of these things, I'm usually a little shocked and a little shocked. Am I shocked? No, disappointed. But here's why. I said it's important to kind of write down your thoughts in books, because sometimes when people think that I'm not a weed puller, because I'm not a weed puller, they forget that the Wholly Educated MFer has an MFer side. So yeah, my thoughts are pretty clear. I lay them all out. And ultimately, what I'm trying to do is to get people to be a little less indifferent in the world and actually care. And that's hard to do. And I believe that if we could get more people to be consistent, then we could get further in the world. If we go back just here in my town, 7 years, there was a situation where a young woman was told that she couldn't be a ballerina in a particular ballet because of her skin being too dark. We go in, we want to pull all the weeds, shake the gates, And then does anybody know what's happening in that district now? Anybody? There's been a superintendency change, several other staff changes. Do you know what's happening over there? When you see that there's a superintendent that got kicked out for trying to create a more racially inclusive environment out there in one of the other suburbs, do we know what's happening there now? Have there been any stories about it? When some student makes a homecoming request using cotton on the poster, do we know what's happening in that district now? When there's a survey to bring back slavery in a district, do we know what's happening there now? And so it's like it's almost like whack-a-mole, you know, something happens. And what I thought was important to share today, and y'all forgive me because I am on vacation, but work gives me lots of joy. So this is the work of Dr. Floyd Cobb and John Cronapple, and they wrote it in a book called I don't know, culture of belonging, something I don't know, belonging through a culture of dignity. But an event happens that's up here, right? Everybody screams, "This ain't us. This is not who we are." The stakeholders always ask for a committee. They form a committee. They hire a consultant and listen. I'm a consultant, so this is helpful to me. And then everybody want to talk about it. They're shocked that they don't see any change. The people inside the system say, "Hey, can't we just go back to doing what we used to do?" They get disenfranchised, especially the committee, because things ain't happening the way they say. And they say, "Just tell us what to do and we'll do it." And then in schools, they say, "Let's get back to good teaching." In corporations, they say, "Let's just get back to good, solid leadership behavior." In nonprofits, it just say, "Let's get closer to our mission and vision." Um, it is consistent, you know. And I ain't got to make it up. This is what it looked like. And I just love that Cobb and Cronapple done laid it all out, because this ain't, this is not earth shattering the way that this happens. And what I tend to think is challenging is that people believe that if you just fire folk, that fixes things. Oh, it does. It can give you some immediate action. But the long term, if you have not fixed that garden, honey, then weeds are the most persistent. If anytime you don't want something to grow somewhere, you got to work hard on to keep it not to keep it out. You got to work hard on it. And you got to work hard on it for an extensive period of time. And when I'm talking about organizations, I hope you can translate that to yourself too. Because, honey, I asked today, was this a learning year, or was this a questioning? Was this a year where questions were answered, or was this a year where you were learning um, things? And I will tell you that this year has been nothing but a year of answers for me around a lot of things. Now, this takes me to the point in which why I don't like writing things down in books. Part of the reasons why I don't like writing things down in books is because things change. So I wrote The Wholly Educated MFer in 2020. And what's interesting is just this week, I do believe that someone who might be atheist certainly was trying to ask me, how can my religion be inclusive of them? And I got to tell you, y'all, my faith, I feel, doesn't have anything to do with anybody else's. And I really feel very strongly about that. But what I hate about my personal life that I wrote in here is that I have an entire section about my father that, if you've been following me any length of time, you know that I found out this year that my father is not my father, that there's some other guy who's my father. And while the sentiments about him are still the same, the book is inaccurate. And that happens sometimes as your position changes, as your thoughts change, that if you write a book, now you have solidified into the universe what your thinking is. And if you're like me, you learn new things all the time. And so I want to be really specific when I'm talking about weed pullers. I'm not necessarily talking about policy and procedure, because when I think about institutional change, I think about the personal work that needs to happen so that people can recognize that policy is exclusionary, that it's leaving people out, that it needs to be changed. But when I'm talking about weed pullers, I'm talking about the people who are actually willing to tear down the entire structure in order to make sure that it works for everyone. I'm not opposed to a little bit of roundup here and there. I think it's important. The challenge is the people who are like, just dismantle this entire system. Here's what I would prefer. So I'm an engineer and chemical engineer, but I understand a little bit about some of the other bodies of practice. When you, let's say a house is built on a shaky foundation, which all of the institutions in the United States of America fall into that category. You can lift the house up, repair the foundation, and then put the house back down. That is strategic in my engineering mind. It makes sense in my engineering mind. It leaves a situation in which the people who live in the house are not harmed. Hopefully, while you got the house up off the foundation, they've got somewhere else to be. I tend to find, not always, I tend to find that weed pullers are the types of folks that are like, while you're living in the house, let me blow the foundation up. And I'm like, mm, where these people gonna go? Today in Kansas City, let me just check, make sure I'm speaking accurately. It is several degrees below monkeys behind, as my grandmama would say. 4 degrees below zero. And I was talking with Josh Hengis, who's responsible for trying to help solve some of the homelessness issues in Kansas City. And Josh says that 80% of the homeless problems in Kansas City are actually financially based. I lost my job and so I'm outside, right? My family has been disrupted, so I'm outside. The primary thing that Josh has a hard time getting people to understand is that it is dangerous to live outside. Now, I just want you, yesterday I had to go outside to get the mail. I had to go outside because I had to put down a little salt. And I wanted to wear this coat because for all the people who think you shouldn't have these coats, look, this thing warm, child. And if you weren't here at the beginning, I did not buy it. My mother-in-law gave it to me. See, her initials in here, and I just had these little, it just added. um, argue with somebody else, not me. Get somebody else to do it. But it's dangerous to live outside. And if you don't believe that, you need to go outside and live out there. Like, just go out there, sleep out there right now, and then tell me it's not dangerous outside. It is dangerous outside. And sometimes, for the sake of perfection, we won't do the small things that can be helpful, like taxing the rich. Like, people think that somehow I'm like some bleeding heart liberal. I actually am not. But how do you make sense of the fact that there is a singular person who can pay $250 million in bail? Like, and what kind of taxes you think that person, what kind of taxes do you think that person is paying? Because all I know is I I know I pay way more than $750 in way more than $750 in taxes every year. And you got to see your former president's tax returns. Like, this stuff is just not okay. And so does this system need to be dismantled? Yes. But there's an exception, I think, when we talk about blowing up institutions. We have to always remember that there are children at the other end of our data points when we are talking about school districts. Um, and how can, and the, we can listen to board members, we can listen to staff, we can listen to alumni, we can listen to parents, we can listen to community members. At the end of the day, the customer in a school district is the children. And we have to listen to what the children want, and we have to do what's best for children. And if there's one group that I feel like all of us should be inclusive of, it's children. We all, you know, men might not necessarily understand the plight of women. Um, Folks who are in dominant racial groups might not understand the plights of people who are in oppressed race groups. If you're in leadership, you might not understand the plight of the everyday um, employee. Positional power does cause people to not understand each other. However, Every adult knows what it's like to be a child. And when we get older, what we do instead of coaching and developing and providing wisdom and helping to elevate the revolutionary spirit of children, the fairness that children tend to know in their hearts, what we do is like these young people today, or we discount what they're asking for. One of my first books around activism was called The Soft Revolution, and mine is in really terrible shape. Um, I hate that I don't even have it here to show you. It's probably in my room because I still read it. I think somebody needs to rewrite it. What what we have to do, the children should not be on the front lines fighting, and I know that's what we think. But historically, when you look at what Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King did with the children, it was only the children who helped to get some of the civil rights protections that we currently have today. And we about a month away from celebrating King's birthday, and I'm going to talk about this probably every week. Do not do give me the I have a dream king, because that's not that ain't it. The man lived 6 years. He was only 39 when he died, and he lived 6 years beyond the March on Washington. And he wasn't even the most revolutionary in what he was sharing that day. A. Philip Randolph was. But if you're going to cite King, read some of his latest work, his latest pieces of work, which is why it's important that people write things down in books. You don't have to guess or wonder what Dr. King would have liked or felt or believed. Dr. King wrote it all down in a book. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community? And today, in 2022, we would call him a weed puller, when in actuality, King was very much a tiller planter in terms of how he showed up. So I don't even know what the heck I was trying to say, except for look, if you got to be outside, some coats are warmer than others. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. We got plenty work to do.